where I'm going to give a little bit of an introductory talk, kind of give you an overview of what we're going to be doing today, talking about chaining, talking about indexing, LLMs, vector DBs, LLMOps, basically all the buzzwords today. That's what we're going to do. And then actually have not updated this. We're going to fine tune nothing today. That's not what we're going to do. We're going to actually do some document querying with LangChain. So this is going to be pretty cool. Chris is going to do the demo as usual at the end of the show today, but we are going to get you some interaction with everybody, and we are going to make sure that we give you an overview of what this is all about. There's going to be a ton of depth that Chris is going to squeeze into a little bit at the end, but as always, we'll give you the code and we'll give you the resources that you need to dig further in. Okay, so most people, when they're using LLMs, they're using them like this. That's ChatGPT right there. Boom, done. Us, as builders of applications and trying to be super useful to our companies, to the world, we're actually doing more than zero shot and more than few shot. We're trying to build stuff that makes our boss really happy. And everybody's boss is happy these days, thinking about the idea of using ChatGPT on their data. And that's really what everybody's asking about. How do I do this? How do I do my stuff, but with OpenAI stuff? And the answer is you can do that. You can do that with OpenAI stuff. You can do that with everybody else's stuff too. And it requires a few technical things, though. It's not quite as simple as use ChatGPT for your data, even though it is quite that simple. The main thing that we want to take away from today is this idea of chains. This is the main abstraction innovation when we talk about LangChain, we talk about other indexing tools. This is the fundamental thing. We want to connect stuff together. What are we going to use? We're going to use a chain. And so the idea is, what are the core chains? What are the components of the chains? What are we actually chaining together? That's sort of what we want to get a handle on. If you look at this diagram on the right here, we've got three core chains in the dotted outline: prompt chain, tools chain, data indexing chain. It's kind of like a pipeline of chains, but it's almost like a matrix of chains too. It's sort of like this, the chains are put together in interesting ways. And we can use LangChain, as we'll see today. We could also use other tools that are coming out and emerging. Tools, they're competing with each other. Everybody's getting excited about them. This is a sort of emergent space, very early on in the funding game for these companies as well. So we'll see that. Now, when we talk about LangChain, it is a generic interface for interacting with LLMs. So it's just an abstraction. It's not like a thing in and of itself that we really need. It's a connector of all other things. And the idea is that LLMs are great, but when we just ask question, get answer, they're not as great as they could be. If we combine them with other great things, they could be even greater. And that's where chaining comes in. When we talk about indexing, there's nothing really that special here. What we're talking about is we're taking our doc or our documents, and we're splitting it into some chunks. And then we store those chunks as embeddings in a database. The database has a special name because we're storing embeddings. It's called a vector database because embeddings, they are basically the words turned into numbers. Lists of numbers are just vectors. The vector database is really useful because you can search through lots of words really quickly. And we will send the recording of this out. Okay, so let's see sort of a simplified flow using a prompt chain, a tools chain, a data indexing chain. Now, we have our three chains. You also notice we have the LLM, and we have the vector database, and we have, of course, super importantly, data-centrically, our single document. And so, if we kind of think about, we've got prompting we've got data indexing from the document. And then we've got our tool chain that's actually helping us do the searching. Then we've got our database, we've got our LLM. These are all the core components. If we get a handle on these, we have a handle on the whole shebang. And just as an aside here, yes, this is just a database. It's a special kind of database, but it's really good at storing embeddings and fetching stuff really quickly. But it's still a database. And in fact, if you don't have a ton of data, you can just use a regular database for these things. So it's a special thing that's only really good if you have a bunch of data. Okay, so how does all of this fit together? LLMs, vector DBs, documents, chaining, data indexing, prompting. Well, enter newest buzzword of the day, LLMOps, right? Duh, LLMOps is the answer. And what we're thinking about is in the center of this LLMOps, that's the chaining. All right, the chaining is there. That's your developer tool stack. That's your abstraction. That's your connected all together. We could pull models from Anthropic, Cohere, OpenAI, anything open source, whatever. We can also pull in any vector database we want. People getting 50 million, 100 million, 3 million. These people are getting funding like crazy just to build vector databases. They've been around a while. The ones that have been around were well positioned. There's really one main developer tool that's worth understanding and really buying into today, and it's LangChain. That's why we're focused on this one. And, you know, this idea of LLMOps is just sort of how are we doing all of this? And how are we putting it together to build interesting LLM applications and then deploy them into production? Okay, when it comes to chaining, this is why LangChain is the best. No bias, just saying, I think it's clearly the best. I think just buy the money that you're seeing, go out, buy the newness, buy how hot this is, okay? You know, Harrison has got like speaking slots in keynote slots at all the biggest events, like he's crushing it right now. Just got 10 million seed funding. They're blowing up all over the place. They just started a new newsletter, sign up for that. But they're like the only one that's new that's crushing it right now. Llama Index is really good, but they're still open source. There's no funding there. Jerry Liu, the guy that created it, is doing great things, but it's just, he's falling behind LangChain more and more every day. You just can't keep up with somebody that's building the rocket ship. So the rocket ship is LangChain. Now, there are some other people doing other things that you'll probably hear about. For example, Haystack has been around for years. They're focused on extractive question and answering. They've been doing that for years. Well positioned as LLMs have come up onto the scene. And, you know, I think in terms of the other things that the chaining and LLMOps companies are doing, seeing agents and sort of interesting things you can do with memory as you're building these applications, you're going to see other players jump into the foray here. For example, Level AI is an older company as well that's always been focused on call centers. And they're releasing an open source project that you may or may not have heard about yet called Agent GPT, because agents are one of the new hottest things. So, I mean, this is such a nascent space that you can't, I mean, as Todd mentioned, I mean, there's going to be tons of players. There's going to be tons of stuff that happens, tons of competition yet to come. But, you know, the horse to bet on today, my opinion, LangChain. So if you're going to learn something, learn that. Now, the more mature piece of this LLMOps infrastructure actually is the vector DB folks. All right. These are all the people that LangChain support. And the vector DB folks you probably heard about are Pinecone. It's like you look at this chart, it's like, okay, I see why I've heard about them. 100 million. legit. Weaviate, maybe I've heard of them, 50 million, pretty legit. And there's some other smaller players. Facebook has their own vector database, open source. Elasticsearch has been around for a long, long time. They've gotten in the game. Chroma DB, we're going to see Chris leverage this today in his little demo. He's got at the end here. It's a nice choice. And, you know, Milvus, for instance, is an open source thing, but it's actually built by company Zilla's, a Chinese company that has basically gotten $100 million Series B as well. And, you know, I think there's just a lot happening in this space. It looks a lot more mature because they've been around a lot longer and they finally found their application space. Chaining, not so much. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to kind of get the juices flowing for all of you today. This is a community session. This isn't just, you know, us talking and you listening. Hopefully it's more creative and you guys get a chance to meet some other cool people that are interested in this cool stuff. So we've recently been teaching a class called Building with LLMs. And we hear a lot of the same sort of projects. And you might be thinking about some of the same sort of projects in your lives as well. And we want to kind of share a couple of these ideas and then let you talk about what you're interested in building with LLMs. In a breakout room, we'll come back, we'll sort of debrief and share together. So one of the ideas that we've heard about that I think is a great way to sort of get started thinking about indexing, it's not even necessarily, you know, something that is super required to build yourself. But if you just think about sort of natural language searching through all the pages of any given website. For example, like think of hotelx.com, and you just take all of the pages from the website and you just want to be able to interact and answer any question about whatever this hotel is doing, whatever's going on in it, whatever anybody interested in any aspect of the hotel might want to ask. And basically scrape all the data. You can get Bing or ChatGPT to write the data, write the code to do the scraping. We proved this out in class the other day. It's pretty fun. And so scrape everything, store it in a vector DB, and then just see if you can query it with natural language using an LLM. Really simple, nice chaining application that you don't have to go and kill yourself on. Even easier is just take a document that's already, you know, written and just start with that. That's what we'll show you how to do at the end of the day today. But to get a little indexing action with some live data, this would be a cool sort of step one simple application. You might even build sort of an AI tech support bot, let's say, where you might create a fine-tuned LLM. If you caught our sort of discussion of fine-tuning today, what we're talking about here is really narrowing in that input and output. And maybe you might train that with some frequently asked questions from some technical documentation. Imagine, you know, if you're a person at the tech support desk, you probably get frequently asked questions. You probably go and you look at the answer, you give the answer. And then if you can't find the answer, you probably look through the technical documentation. So that's exactly what you'd want to build a bot to do. See if the frequently asked question is there. If it's not, say, no, I'm not sure. Let me look in the documentation. And so the one fine-tuned LLM that looks and basically you ask it for frequently asked question answers would then also be backed up by an LLM that was indexing all of the technical documentation. So this would require chaining because you actually have a fine-tuned LLM and then a non-fine-tuned LLM that's just hitting the indexed data. So people say, put ChatGPT on top of my data. Well, it needs to be broken down into coherent steps a lot of times. So this is sort of a mild two-stepper. And of course, the thing that everybody wants is they want to basically build the AI vice president, right? CEO goes, he says, hey, tell me A, B, C, X, Y, Z about your department. What's going on? So one of the cool things that we're seeing a lot of people kind of interested in is this idea of creating a fine-tuned LLM to generate SQL queries that would actually be leveraged in your database structure. And maybe they're common things that product or sales or marketing, they ask you and you have to run the query half the time, right? Because they don't know SQL. So that's a good application right there. But if you took it a step further, You could even say, okay, then chain it together with something that's performing the SQL query, returning that quantitative result, comparing that result against the question asked, and combining it into a real nice natural language response. This is obviously the holy grail, so to speak, if you solve the meta problem here, but it's not the holy grail if you don't try to solve it for everybody in every context. If you just try to solve it for yourself in your database context, you can actually get pretty far really quickly. But this I would call a 2+ stepper, and this one is maybe medium to wild right here. So it's simple, mild, and medium to wild. Now we want to give you guys some time with all this in mind. There's a lot going on to discuss what projects you're working on. We'd like to hear about some of the coolest projects from any of the breakout rooms that you're discussing, because, well, quite frankly, we're interested in running more community sessions, and we'd love to showcase and give you some support to build some awesome, cool projects. So again, if you don't want to take part in the breakout room session, that's okay. You can come back in about 20 minutes for the discussion. This is going to be the main breakout session. We're going to have 10 people per room. Everybody do introductions, talk about why you're interested in this particular topic, talk about what you're interested in building. And I'd love one person from each room. Looks like we'll have about 10, maybe 8 to 10 rooms or so to share with the group some of the coolest project ideas. Let's see if we can do some pattern matching together and see what everybody's interested in building. And who knows, maybe we can make some connections today or beyond this community session with other people trying to build similar things. And we can all get better and more powerful and create more value together. So with that, we're going to go ahead and head to breakout rooms. And we're going to give you the prompt. What useful LLM tasks are you trying to solve? What projects are you trying to build? And what do you think about all this indexing and chaining stuff? We'll see you back in 20 minutes for group discussion. We hope that that was a useful and interesting and fun discussion with the people in your room. And what we'd love to hear is, some of the discussions that you had. Let's kind of go through room by room. I mean, the question is sort of what projects are you interested in building? What are you building now? What are you looking at? What's your company asking for? How about room 6? Encore, Anna, Dan, Eva, Sarah was in there, Tatiana. And yeah, who from your group would like to share?
I can go. I took some notes on what everyone was talking about. So we have a few different things we discussed from a use case perspective, from industry perspective. One was healthcare. We talked about triage, patient triage. We talked about caregivers and care advocate use cases. So more on, so caregivers is triage over there, and then the advocates on the other side who are listening to it. And then how can we help bring tools to help create summarization and next steps that can be shared with caregivers. We talked about an example that someone talked about of meal creation based for caregiver use case as well, where just meal creation based on health conditions could be very interesting to solve for, which is very difficult right now because caregivers don't always know what needs to be done in that space. So healthcare was one big topic. We talked about building a knowledge base from already internal repository that has information for technical information and about issues that have come up for customers, and using that to build an AI assistant that can help the customers coming in, and then also adding publicly available information to that so that it's more comprehensive to help customers with different issues. And then the third one that we talked about was an environment space where we want to try and upload PDFs which have certain information and answer questions based on the contents of that PDF. For example, salt contaminants, I think, was something that was brought up. So I think those were some of the 3 things we talked about. We didn't get a chance to go over everyone's examples, but it was great. We had a very constructive discussion.
Awesome. And I wonder, I'm going to call you out, Michael Wright, our resident healthcare AI expert. What do you think about all those applications? I mean, are you thinking about any of these in particular?
Not in the space that I'm currently in necessarily, but those I'd like to flesh them out. I think they'd be very interesting to kind of hear the use case and elaborate on. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was a hurricane of use cases. So yeah, I think part of it was, and sorry, my iPad glitched out, so I started typing. I'm going to send out sort of the notes later to everybody. But yeah, I'm glad to hear it was a great discussion. And let's see what we hear from some of these other rooms. How about room 8? Alan, Linda, Michael, Nishant, Ray, Tom. What'd you talk about? And if you didn't designate somebody, then somebody's got to step up. Or tap the room out. Nobody from room 8?
I can say some stuff. So they're talking about some internal things for their company probably. And they're probably talking about some cool stuff they're going to build and like for the stuff they're doing and for games and stuff. Anything else I missed?
Todd, you're the man. You're hilarious. What did your room talk about, Todd? Room 2.
Okay, I was actually the note taker, so I have pretty good notes.
Yeah.
There's one that's fine-tuned for law. So that was one. There's one we all really like. Well, it's startup advice. So like this person has like a database in their brain. We're going to hook an API to it and basically LLM it startup advice, which is awesome. Another person's been working with cancer patients, and they do the work manually now in 24-hour turnaround, help them have resources, financial, diet, whatever resources they turn around, to nonprofits through information. But they want to be able to use that. They want to be able to use that to LLM instead, so it's instant turnaround for their people. Another person's working on some pretty interesting, like structured database stuff. So Excel, Cubes, Power BI, and so they can return now currently they return like SQL type stuff, but they want to be able to return the answer, like so. Querying the structured data. Also knowing that structured data is a hard problem. They unstructured is also part of their thinking, because they also want to do Copilot for internal support. So Copilot for the structured data and Copilot for like internal support type stuff. And then another person's doing an in-world AI for to reproduce a holodeck, which probably most people here know. I wasn't 100% sure. Like, I guess it's Star Trek or something like that. And then another person.
Like, seriously?
Okay, and then
I'm not 100% sure either, actually. So yeah, I mean,
What?
I'm gonna look it up though. I'll be sure after today. So thank you everybody for guilting me and Todd into that.
Yeah, another person does like machine learning apps for like primarily vision, but other things too. And they want to build a training portal for the onboarding. Use some of their internal code. Like make that good examples for their onboarding their employees. Another person said chat AI bots. Currently they have a lot of old tech, and they have chat bots, and we didn't get to talk about it in detail, but the LLMs probably can help solve their problem. Definitely, tech support type stuff, but I'm not sure if those we didn't get deep into the details of it, but that's what I captured.
Sure. All right. Nice. Great, Todd. Hey, I wonder from 3, if you talk a little bit about what the discussion was around Steamship's recent work presented at Harvard. I think Ali and I are familiar with Steamship's work, and kind of curious to hear what the latest and greatest is that everybody's paying attention to there.
All I'll say is that I watched the Harvard
CS50 presentation they did, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and they have an offering where you just click on the links that they gave you, and you get I mean, it's almost like the OpenAI stuff. You get free access to do a bunch of model building with LangChain, and they give you demos of how to do it, and they run queries for you. And it's kind of slow, and they have paid plans and so on, but they have some great open source examples out there that, I mean, I was wondering what you all thought of their code base and so on. I liked, it seemed pretty clean to me, and fresh and new, as with all the rest of the things that are going on here. But they definitely seemed on top of things, and they'd done some hackathons just before in the classes there, and so I think they had a significant number of people that were playing with it. So that's great.
Yeah. I'm under Ali. Do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share? I know you looked pretty deeply into this. If anybody else has stuff they shared in their room, please post in the chat, because we are going to give Chris a little bit of time to run the demo today.
Yeah, we talked to Steamship earlier, earlier when they were doing their stuff, and they were going through a lot of iterations. So they've been through a ton of iterations, and I love the quick deployment of being able to take your model and just kind of throw it quickly into deployment where you have some kind of endpoint and everybody's able to utilize it. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of people sort of creating these sort of, I don't know, let's call them API zoos, like the model zoos of old, kind of just like tap, whatever you need. And I think, that's definitely a thing that I've seen a lot of companies trying to build. It's really hard to get that right and come up with a business model that, people actually pay for, and things that people find, production ready and super useful. So interesting to see that space evolve for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so maybe if there's somebody else dying to sort of share, otherwise we'd love to sort of hear in the chat what your room talked about. Any other rooms, feel free to raise your hand or just unmute. This is an informal kind of thing we're doing.
Yeah, in room 7, I am a vice president of engineering. And so when you said the AI VP, I was laughing, but I don't really want the qualitative aspect, not like give me numbers, but more the sort of more intangible parts, like what's the right strategy when you build a platform versus a product. And I have reams of documents I've written over the years in my career. And so I've wanted to put all of that into an LLM. And so either myself, if I'm just like busy, I'm just like, hey, like, what's the right way to think about this problem? I know I've seen before, I can't remember, or give it to other people in their career path to be like, hey, here's sort of a good way to like think about how to grow an engineering organization. Another thing was portfolio manager for actual investments, just having like a natural language interface for like, show me all of my investments that in the last year have done better than 7% internationally or something like that. And then also we had ideas for improving mental health and working with people, either mental health or depression or memory impairments, and being able to really help individuals that are afflicted by things like that.
Yeah. I love that example actually. And, I think, so I did the kind of this the other day, and I was submitting a talk, and I sort of said, hey, read my LinkedIn profile and read my blog and tell me what talk I should give. And it gave me a great, and I had the specific questions of the talk that I gave it, and it gave me a really awesome, and like, hey, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of started with it after I read it, it was stuck in my brain, and then I was thinking about it. So even if you just say, hey, read these docs and then answer these questions, you don't even have to like analyze it for voice and tone. It sort of like builds all that in, and it kind of sounded like maybe I could have written it. And the more you have, I know that some authors have done this. That's such a powerful thing, but keeping that also clean, like all human generated from your mind only, I think is really, really, going to be a value add, I think, for people moving forward. Like I don't want to muddy up my blog with too much AI generated content, for instance. Like I think that that source of truth repository is going to be powerful in years to come. Okay, so yeah, definitely share whatever you talked about in the room. I'll try to write sort of a recap of what we talked about today for LinkedIn tomorrow, and we'll also share the slides. We'll share the recording. But I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to see Chris's demo today. So for those of you that want to see the actual code, Chris is going to show us exactly how to build a question answering bot with LangChain. I'm just going to show you just a quick overview of what this looks like. And my screens got messed up when my iPad froze. Story of my life these days. So let me just get this over here for everybody. And so the idea is he's going to use OpenAI's GPT-3 Turbo. He's going to use Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He's going to use LangChain. He's going to use Chroma DB. And you can check it out here. We'll share the link with you in the chat. So go ahead and share screen. Take it away from here, Chris.
Oh, I'm muted. Sorry. Alrighty. Yes. So here we go. Just a brief overview of what the thing's going to do. I'll zoom in a lot so you guys can see this. Basically, we have this application on Hugging Face, so you can check it out if you want to. And what it does is it lets us ask questions of the first Hitchhiker's Guidebook. So we can ask it, who is Arthur Dent? We have Arthur Dent as a human who's been living on Earth for 15 years. He's the protagonist of the story and is currently talking to an old man who has a hovercraft. Huge, important information there. So, but how did we get here, right? Well, it starts with installing our dependencies as always. So we're going to grab ourselves OpenAI and LangChain. Because we're going to leverage OpenAI, we also have to include our API key, which is important so that you can run this by querying GPT 3.5 Turbo. We make a helper function just to print outputs a little bit better, and then we can set up our actual chat model to hook up to the service we want to use. Perfect. Okay, so going on, we have just some brief introductory things. This is done all in Colab, by the way, so you can run it yourself. Because this doesn't require any kind of resources, you can use the free edition as long as you have an OpenAI API key. We're going to go ahead and just showcase a little bit about what this prompt thing is. So we have this idea of system messages, user messages, and assistant messages. You can think of it this way, right? System messages are what we instruct the model with. User messages are how we ask questions or interface with the model. And then assistant messages are how we pretend to be the model so that we can guide its outputs by giving it some examples of how it might respond. Then we can just send that group of those prompts into the model and get ourselves an output. This is basically how you would normally use ChatGPT, but we're using Python. That's the difference here. We can do some cooler stuff, set up some templates so that we have the ability to tweak variables as we make those calls. So we set up this particular template here. You are an expert in subject and you're currently feeling mood. And then we have our content. We pass those into our chat prompt template as our system prompt and our user prompt. So again, this is our instructions, and then this is what we're saying. And then we can get this response back. We make our LLM an expert in cheeses. Their mood is tired. And we ask them what are the finest cheeses, and they give us a list of cheeses, which are definitely, I don't know about cheddar, but the rest of them seem fine. So there you go. We can also, because we've built the chain without doing any new work, we can ask it to talk about classic cars, be sarcastic, and then ask it if the Chevy 67 Impala is a good car. And then they sarcastically answer that it is, in fact, a good car. So that's the introduction to what we're doing. Now, how do we add our documents? Well, firstly, we need to get our document. In this case, we just get the text file for the first Hitchhiker's Guidebook. It's open source. You can get it for free off the internet. That's fantastic. Thanks, Douglas Adams. We want to read this into memory, and then we're going to split it into manageable chunks. The reason we do this is because, as you guys know, you can't put infinite text into the into ChatGPT. It has a limit of how much we can feed it at once. And so we split our text to make sure that it's in manageable sizes for when we're interacting with the LLM. You can imagine that we're just splitting on new lines here. So it's just grabbing chunks of text that are consistent to each other. So they're from the same part of the story, each chunk. And we break our big book into a bunch of tiny documents. In this case, there's 293 total documents that we're using. Now we have to turn that text into something that the computer can understand. So we're going to use a process called embeddings to do that. We're just going to leverage OpenAI's embeddings since we're already using the tool. What this is going to do is it's going to let us convert that text into a bunch of vectors. And that's going to, let us have the ability to query it by similarity metrics like cosine similarity or other distance measures that measure how close two vectors are. We got to get some dependencies in order to use the vector DB that we're going to be using today, which is Chroma DB. So we go ahead and install those. And then we create our doc search, which is just our Chroma vector store with the as retriever method, which means that we can use this to pull relevant documents. So all this piece is doing is saying, hey, we have this query, what makes towels important? And when we ask the doc search, right, we find but the closest passages to our query. So we find the passages that are semantically closest to what make towels important. And then we have these content where you can wrap around yourself for warmth as you bound across the cold moons of Jaglin Beta. We get a bunch of context relevant to the towels, and that's what we wanted to see. Lastly, to convert this into something that works the way we want, we need to add it into a chain, right? So we're going to use the load QA chain here, which is going to let us ask our chain questions and then receive natural language answers. So the way you can think of this is that we send our query, right? It modifies it in whatever way or augments it in whatever way is best, depending on the kind of chain we're using. It fetches relevant documents, and then it passes that all to ChatGPT, in this case, GPT 3.5 Turbo, and it says, hey, answer this question that the user has based on these snippets or these pieces of context. And then it synthesizes an answer for us. One of the best parts of this process is, as you can see, how much cheese in this book, I've asked it. There is no cheese in this book. So it has the ability to fail to find an answer, which is something very helpful if you're looking to prevent or avoid those pesky hallucinations. And then, yeah, we can come back here and ask things like, why is a towel important? I know the towel thing, Hitchhiker's Guide thing, you got to do it. You're paying the content tax there. But the idea is it searches, it sends off, right? It's collecting relevant documents, and then it's having GPT 3.5 Turbo process for it. And we see here, a towel is important because it has immense psychological value. It goes on, but that's the idea, and that's how we build it. So there you go. I know this is fast, but there you go. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know, and I'll answer them as best I can.
Immense psychological value. That's towels for you. Awesome. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We are at time here. We want to make sure that you can get on with your day. And we'd love to see you at the next community session. It's to be announced. We want to try to hold these weekly. We're not sure what the topics are going to be. We'd love your feedback on those. Feel free to reach out to us directly on LinkedIn, on Twitter, if you're in the FourthBrain Slack, or anywhere else you can find us. Greg at FourthBrain.ai, Ali at FourthBrain.ai, Chris at FourthBrain.ai, Michael at FourthBrain.ai. And so thank you so much. If there's anything you'd really love to see, I'd love to hear about it personally. But that's it for today. And we really do look forward to seeing you at the next one, and the next one, and the next one after that, as we continue to try to build up this FourthBrain community, keep everybody up to date on LLMs and generative AI. So thanks all. We will see you next time. Till then, cheers, everybody.